This event is in preparation for our very next event, which is on October 25th. The event is titled Fill Your Ballot, Navigating Your Local Election. And like I said before, it's on October 25th, and we hope to see as many people as we can there. If you have been to any of our previous artist workshops, this one, like Jamie said, it is going to look a little bit different. Tonight, we're going to dive deep in conversation about our artist prompt, which is to create art that speaks to any aspect of local government and election. And as we've seen before in previous workshops, this art will be channeled through the four pillars. And again, the four pillars, they are artistry, kindness, community, and the seven whole artist elements. For those of you who are new to our events, the seven whole artist elements and the four pillars, they are basically, I'm going to give you a brief description of each of them, just so we can kind of, be on the same page. So basically, kindness is reaching out with pure selfless intention, selfless. I'm testing you all, making sure you know that we're on the right page. Kindness is reaching out with pure selfless intention. And in regards to art for social renewal, it's while you're creating art, while you're performing your art, whether it be visual or spoken or performative, you want to keep in mind your audience, take into consideration what they might have been through in their life. And speaking of your audience, the next element is community, and community is outreach, it's speaking with others, having that personal conversation, connecting, really engaging with them. And again, for the art, for social renewal, that's just really taking into the people, making those connections, making those relationships, and then using those relationships and bonds that you form and the trust that is created, using that to really dive deep into the art and dive deep into whatever conversation might come afterwards. And then artistry, of course, with any type of art piece, there's going to be artistry, and that's creative skill, craftsmanship, it's creativeness. In regards to art for social renewal, it's the ability to take what you've learned and create a work that is expressive and creative. And then the seven whole artist elements, there's a lot. I'm going to go into the names of each. So we have curiosity, we have courage, hunger, passion, connectivity, knowledge, and the last one is sensual development. We have all of our artist workshops in the past. We've really dived into each of these elements, each of the four pillars. And so if you want to dive more into those, please go into our Facebook pages on the Creative Core or on Our Voice Our Day. We have them all down there listed. So if you want to watch all of them, one of them, some of them, we'd love to see your views there. We'd love to see maybe any comments you have. You can reach out to us with any questions that you might have afterwards. We're always here and willing and wanting to talk to you. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Carrington.
Right. Before I get into what I would like to share, I think Barry will share our prompt for the night and our prompt for the 25th event. Yeah, so we're focusing on local elections for this coming event on the 25th. The title of the event is Fill Your Ballot, Navigating Your Local Election. All right, so in preparing your ballot, allow your research to lead you to an artistic expression that shares something that you experienced or learned about in the process. Something that you learned about in the process, yourself in the process, our government, our community, etc. In other words, allow the process of doing the research necessary to vote inspire your art. So this is probably the most interesting of all of our prompts so far, and it requires the most tangible information and practical information, and that's going to be interesting to translate to art, but that's exactly what we're going to talk about here tonight. So what I would like to share with you all is this little exercise. Not really an exercise, but it's more like a discussion thing, but we'll see. So check out, hopefully this comes out right. Cool. So check out those questions in the chat and I'll read those too. So how are you planning to vote, whether it be mail-in ballot or in person? Did you recognize your local candidates? Do you know what all the position titles mean? And is there anything that you feel uneducated on? And if so, how did you feel not knowing this? So basically, what I would like us to do is to go around answering this question, and if there are any gaps that need to be filled for any of us, that we can all chime in and try and fill it, and hopefully we come out of this learning more, knowing more than we did when we started. So I can start. I am planning to vote by mail-in ballot. I'm going to use a drop-off box that's like around the corner from my house. Um, I recognized one of my local candidates because I'm not sure if you all know, Elijah Cummings just passed away recently this year, and he's my representative in Congress for District 7 in Maryland. Um, so there's an election to replace him right now, and I did recognize both of those candidates. But there are two judges that I did not recognize, so I had to do some research, but I couldn't really find much research on the judges. Um, Yeah, I didn't necessarily understand how the court system worked when I was looking through it. So I had to do a lot of research in that area. But after doing like spending an hour and a half on that, I kind of understand how the court election things works. Um, and in regard to anything that I feel uneducated on, it's probably the questions on the ballot. So for example, yeah, after actually like looking through the candidates, there's like question A, B, C, D, all the way down. There's a lot of them. And yeah, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, like it's just hard to feel qualified to answer those questions because they're talking about like massive amounts of money and things like that. But yeah, that's basically everything I have to share on that.
I can jump in next, Carrington. I plan on voting in person during early voting. I actually just found my polling place today. It's super close to my house. So I'm kind of lucky. I was worried I'd have to go maybe like 30 or 40 minutes away because there's not a whole lot available and it's kind of like spread out in the county. Um, I didn't recognize my local candidates. I've started the process of researching, but there's still a lot to, I guess, look into just as a whole throughout the ballot. Um, and now I'm starting to learn what the position titles mean. I know there was like a running joke between some of us about like not knowing what a comptroller is. I know what that is now, but I'm still taking the time to understand kind of like the judge situation and the Supreme Court situation and stuff like that. Um, and kind of like Carrington said, the wording of a lot of these questions takes a lot of brain cells. Like, I feel like it's not a common language. I feel like it's not a common dialect. I feel like it's almost elitist in the wording, dare I say. So that's very confusing for me. I think being able to use context clues and break through and even understanding what they're asking in order to research more has been difficult. And I think it's a little frustrating for me to have to not work so hard, but I guess put in so much guesswork to figure out what they're really asking me.
I'll go next. So I think I'm going to. I haven't decided if I'm going to mail in or go in person. I kind of want to go in person, but I mean, I have my mail in ballot, so just in case, I'm not sure what I want to do yet. And I think my polling place is in. It's somewhere near Towson University, so that's cool. And I didn't even look through it. It was all kind of like there was like what 3 layers of information inside the mail envelope. Um, I didn't really look through it all the way. I was trying to go through and look at it now, and there's a lot of words in here. So I'm gonna have to take some time and really like read it. But I feel like the only thing I'm really uneducated on is like who the people are. I haven't had time to look or haven't made the time to go and look through each candidate or their um their beliefs and their policies and stuff. And um basically like I don't know, there's 2 different types of judges on here I saw, and I'm not sure what the difference is, so I'll probably look into that. And I kind of feel lost, and it's kind of overwhelming too because I'm responsible for knowing this stuff and I'm supposed to be voting to make a difference and putting my voice, and I don't even know what my voice is because I don't know what exactly I'm doing or I want because I don't understand. So that's how I feel about it.
I can go next. So I'm planning on voting in person. There's a polling place about 20 minutes away from my house, so I'm pretty lucky there. Um, I definitely don't recognize all of the local candidates, which is kind of frustrating, because I want to be able to know who I'm voting for. And so, of course, I'm going to do a lot of research. I've been researching, and I'm researching position titles because, like Jamie, I also didn't know what a comptroller was until doing this project. So there's a lot that I really need to learn and understand more. And I'm thankful for the internet for that. I'm thankful for other people, people that I know that are a lot more educated than I am, that they can help me. um, uh, yeah, there's a lot that I don't know. So I'm definitely going to be doing a lot of researching, and I think that's just what makes me feel stressed and overwhelmed, because I want to make sure that my vote, when I do vote for all the different positions, I want to make sure that it makes a good difference. Um, and so, I'm thinking about this upcoming election and all the different positions that I'm going to be having a say on. And it just feels like there's a lot of pressure. So I want to make sure that I'm really knowing who I'm voting for, and knowing that, I'm not just voting for who will benefit me, because I'm not the only one living here. I got to make sure I find people that I think will benefit as many groups of people as possible. So, there's a lot there, but with research, with talking with other people, I know that I can get through it and get the information that I need to make a well-informed vote, and to be able to stand behind my vote as well.
I can go next. So I actually dropped off my ballot yesterday, which I'm super excited about. Yeah, yay, I'm so excited. I didn't recognize a lot of my local candidates. I had to do a lot of researching. And I was kind of I was kind of frustrated because I couldn't really find like anything that clearly stated the policies, or like what their intentions were. It was just kind of like, oh, like this is where they went to school, like this is their family life, like this is where they go on vacation. I'm like, well, like I don't need to know that. I just want to know like what your intentions are. So yeah, that was a little bit frustrating, but I think eventually after a while I kind of like could get a feel for what their stances were. I didn't know what a lot of the position titles meant. And something I'm also finding is like I research things in the present moment. So like I'm going to research like when I'm voting for a specific candidate, but like it's so overwhelming to just start researching like all the titles when you don't like have them there in front of you. So yeah, I'm definitely feeling like kind of uneducated about that and like a little overwhelmed about that, but I'm like learning a little bit at a time, which is like hopeful. Yeah, so I definitely felt kind of overwhelmed, a little intimidated, like Jamie was saying, like the questions were very just like way above my head. But like the more I could kind of like talk it out with other people and research it, the more comfortable I felt. So yeah, so I feel good now that it's like safely in the ballot box.
I can go. So I got my ballot today. I'm doing a mail-in ballot. Um, and I just moved to this district. And I also don't normally live in Rhode Island. So I definitely was not familiar with the candidates apart from like lawn signs. And that just makes me feel it's just such an odd time to be voting because I think a lot of people, including myself, are in places that they don't normally live. And so to be voting for people who I don't necessarily know and who I probably won't be living under the leadership of for very long because I won't be here very long is just kind of an odd feeling because my vote definitely, as other people have said, is more for other people than it is myself. Um, and the position titles I did know, but I was surprised. For example, there was an amendment for the state name. I had no idea, but the state of Rhode Island is actually the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. And I had no idea that that was the full name of our state. And that obviously has a lot of really hefty connotations. And so it's good to see it on the ballot, but it's also just very surprising to think that I've been living someplace and I didn't even know the full state name. So that I think definitely just like makes you feel really uneducated and ignorant on something, but also upset that like how could I have known that if I hadn't looked it up because it's not something that's really discussed. So I'm happy to see it on the ballot, but it's also just unfortunate that this is my first time hearing about it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Charlotte. That was really interesting. And yeah, that kind of relates to the rest of this voting process. Like a lot of it is not talked about and not like showed to us or exposed to us like we're exposed to everything else. It's kind of like under wraps. So like once we get into it, it's just like all over the place. Um, for the a couple of you mentioned the judges thing. I'm not that this is like not that it matters that I'm a law major, but I'm taking a judicial systems class right now. And we're learning about judicial election, which is like perfectly timely because I barely knew anything about how judges work. But so it depends on your state. I'm not sure how it works in Rhode Island for you, Charlotte, but it usually is either partisan elections, nonpartisan elections, and some states use something special called a merit system. And Maryland actually happens to use a merit system. And in a merit system, I believe the majority of how the elections work is a retention election. So when you saw the judges on your ballot, you probably saw something like yes or no. Um, that's just referring to the judges staying in office basically. So they get nominated here in Maryland, at least they get nominated by the governor and they go into office and they have retention elections, and then we as the voter get to decide if they get to stay in office or not. So we basically put yes or no, and that's the case for all but one of Maryland's courts. But so if you see that, that's a little bit of insight into that.
I want to say something really quickly to Khalifa because I'm pretty positive I read this about if we request mail-in ballots in Maryland and then we decide to vote in person, I think they count those votes 12 days after the election.
Yeah, I read the same article. Basically, what happens is you would do a provisional ballot. It wouldn't be a normal ballot. And if for any reason they deem that you're not a real person, they can throw your ballot out and not count it altogether. And it also doesn't get counted until 12 days after. So there's a lot of risk that your vote won't be counted or your vote could be thrown out.
What? It won't be counted after 12 days if I do in person?
Well, if you do it in person now that you've registered for a mail-in ballot, it's basically going under review, which is why it's a provisional. So there's the option of them just deciding not to count your ballot altogether. And if it does pass their check and they do decide to check it, it won't get counted until 12 days after the election.
So I should mail in my ballot.
Yeah, you should probably mail it in.
I mean, they will count a provisional ballot. It's just that it won't get counted until the 12th because I guess maybe because you've requested a mail-in, and so maybe they want to make sure there's not two ballots coming toward them, I assume, is really the reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing about the mail-in ballot is that there's surprisingly more than a couple ways to turn it in. So yeah, there's the actual mailing, there's the drop-off box, and you can also drop it off at the local elections office, which I heard. So yeah. Also, this particular election should be interesting because it's because of all the mail-in ballots. If the whole 12 days after thing may not be an issue because they're going to take a long time to count the ballots anyway because of all the mail.
Yeah, I've heard it's very unlikely that we will actually hear on November 3rd or 4th who the president is going to be, which I feel like hasn't really happened before in my remembering of it. I feel like it's always that night or the day after.
Mm-hmm.
Except for Bush v. Gore. But other than that, yeah.
I think I forget.
Wait, so what happened with that particular election, Barry?
I went to sleep on the sofa thinking we had President Gore, And I woke up a few hours later and we supposedly had President Bush because Florida became a real question. And then what happened was they wanted to recount, and then it went all the way went through the Florida Supreme Court, which was heavily, I guess, considered Democratic. So the Republican side took it all the way up to the US Supreme Court, and they just overrode the decision of the Florida Supreme Court and pretty much handed the election to President Bush. It was very controversial. And it did extend the knowing of who was going to be president for, I think it was a few weeks. It was a very stressful time.
I feel like there's a lot of potential for something similar to happen this year.
Yeah. It's gonna be so weird not knowing though for like those few weeks or however long it takes. My goodness, it's gonna be tense.
I feel like it's gonna be like, like when you have like a test or like something like negative coming up in like the days and weeks leading up to it, you have like that feeling in your stomach and like you just feel so like uneasy. I feel like it's gonna feel like that for days and days and days.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in terms of practical voting, it seems like if we don't know things, it seems like at the very least we know where to get the information, which is good. And I'm happy to hear that from everybody. So if no one has nothing else to share on this portion of that thing, then my discussion on practical voting is complete. And I will pass it on to Samantha.
Yes, thank you, Carrington. Okay, so now that we've explored some of the practical elements, we're going to talk about the emotional side of voting. And I think this is definitely an emotional election for a lot of people. And, if you are an artist, you're probably familiar with the concept of connecting your emotions to your artwork. So letting feelings about a particular topic inspire what you make can be a really powerful tool for taking your work to the next level. So for our next event on the 25th, as we're looking at local elections, we really want to encourage you to pay attention to how you're feeling. So connect to your individual experience of voting. How do you feel as you're researching? How do you feel as you're talking about elections? And what comes up as you're filling out your ballot? And yeah, really go deep with these emotions and let them fuel your response piece. So to get the juices flowing, we're going to do a little exercise. And basically, we're just going to go around and say one or two feelings about how we're feeling about the election and local elections right now. So I'll start and then I'll just go around how I see the names on the screen. So right now, I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable, a little bit scared, but also hopeful. So Khalifa, do you want to share how you're feeling right now?
I'm feeling overwhelmed, as in it's like just another thing I have to worry about and think about in my mind. So yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Caitlin?
I am feeling both anxious and responsible. I'm anxious because I feel like I don't know a lot. I know I don't know a lot. And so that in and of itself is a really scary thing for me, because I like to be knowledgeable, and the fact that I'm not is really scary, and it's such a very important time coming up. So, even amidst my research, it's just a lot of anxiety is just coming at me. And in regards to responsible, I feel like obviously I'm responsible for my vote, and in relation to being responsible for my vote, I feel like I'm responsible for the outcome. Obviously not just me, but I have a part that I'm playing in whatever happens after this. So it's just like this insane thing. And so I feel anxious, and then I feel responsible, and then I'm back to feeling anxious. So it's just a full circle. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I get that. How about you, Charlotte?
I think I'm feeling frustrated by some of the parts of this that I find to be overly convoluted and frustrated that, I have time and the resources to research these things, but not everyone does. But I'm also feeling passionate that like I have a chance to vote this year, and that I don't know, I think seeing so many young people like you guys being really serious about this and inspiring other people makes me feel really, yeah, just passionate about the whole thing.
Yeah. How about you, Carrington? Do you want to share?
Yeah. So I feel pretty good in the sense that I'm, and so are we, like all a part of like raising that percentage of voter turnout. Like I feel like really good that I'm being a part of this, and like Charlotte was saying, being passionate and being informed about this. I'm feeling kind of critical on myself, because I want to make sure I'm doing all the right things, talking to the right people, and like making sure that my friends and family vote. And things like that, and like making, yeah, and being as educated as possible, because it's not like a test like in school where there's like a set, like a list of things that you need to know, but in this it's just like you just gotta, yeah, it's like free form research, you just have to know things. um and yeah, and I feel nervous as well about, of course, yeah, about like what's going to happen, especially with the presidential, because with my local candidates, they're not like critical positions. I feel like it's not super critical, not half as critical as the presidential is. So I'm like nervous about how that's going to work, and again about like how much farther after November 3rd it could go for.
Yeah. And Jamie, how are you feeling?
It's kind of a collage of what everyone has said. There's like little bits of what everyone has said that I really feel. I have this overwhelming fear of letting down the future generations. I know I talk about this a lot, but as somebody going into education after this election, I will be in education and I'll be student teaching, and then I'll be an actual teacher, and I'll actually be, immersed with these future generations of people. And I feel like actually seeing them and working with them after this, the thought of that makes me very scared to let them down specifically. And it's kind of a fear that I didn't think I would have so strongly. And I also feel like uneducated. Like, I feel like, well, why don't I know these things already? And why is this so hard to read? And there is, where you said hopefulness, I almost feel hopeless, because I know when I send out my ballot, it's out of my control, whatever happens now. And like, I've done all that I can do, and regardless of what happens, like, it's out of my control then. So I think it's a lot of negative emotions, but the positive is, like Charlotte said, like, this is exciting now that I get to be a part of this. And I feel like while this is a scary election to be my first election, I wouldn't want to sit on the sidelines for this election. So I feel very grateful that this is the election that I get to participate in, and it's not another year that goes by when I'm too young,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting how we all shared a different feeling and a different response to what's going on, but at the same time, they're all kind of aligned in a way, like they're all a similar experience. And Caitlin actually has an artwork she would like to share, and it's a great example of how to tie these emotional responses and how to really take them and turn them into pieces of artwork.
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, as Barry is pulling up the screen, as Samantha said before we started discussing our emotions, as artists, a lot of us are most likely familiar with the idea of emotionally charged art. And for me as an artist, that's something that I'm very, very big into. So our very first official event was called it was about how we feel about voting. It was why I hate, love, or I'm confused about voting. And for me, this art piece, it is a direct representation of where my head was at then, and honestly where my head is at now in some ways. The mess of colors, the mess of paint that's at the top of my canvas and surrounding me, all the different colors and all the blend of the different colors into the ugly kind of brown green shade. It kind of, for me, depicts how overwhelmed I am, how anxious I am, and, you know, how there's so much pressure, and the glaring brightness of the orange that stands out the most. I think that is like representational of how insanely important this is. Not just this particular election, but just elections in general always are just so important. And so for me, this piece, I have a lot of different questions and statements that are going around in my head. So, you know, does my vote really make a difference? And just talking about how I really want to use my voice. And is there a candidate that in any position that reflects my values, but also reflects, you know, values that are going to do good for other people, not just my, like, people that are like me, but people on the whole scale, because, you know, it's not just about me. So there's just a lot going on in my head, and that's kind of where I was going with this piece. And it's like we've been talking about, it's a very emotional piece, because I let my emotions, when I started the piece, I had no plan at all. I just let my emotions speak, and, you know, I think that's something that is a good way to create art, you know, because sometimes through emotions, even if they're negative emotions, something beautiful can come out of it, something beautiful and profound. And, you know, I think that's something that can be really good, especially for this particular event that we have coming up. So that's about all I want to say and share about my art. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And then Vari also has a list of emotions that I put together, and I color-coded them, which was really fun. But it's from Nonviolent Communications, which they go into extreme detail with different names for emotions, which I actually found really helpful, because sometimes I don't know what I'm feeling until I like see it in front of me. So as you can see, they're kind of labeled under different categories, and then it goes into detail underneath. And Barry is also going to send this out in an email, so you can kind of refer back to this when you are working on your pieces and trying to figure out, you know, what the heck am I feeling right now? So this is a really good resource. And with that said, I'm going to pass it off to Khalifa, who's going to lead us in the next bit.
Hey, so thanks, Samantha. I just want to say thanks for that. The color coding the words, that's really, I think that was really helpful, or that will be really helpful when creating art. So now that we got some emotions, like we know our feelings kind of, and we know some information. So how about we brainstorm and maybe try to come up with some ideas for creating art? Maybe if you're trying to create art for the next event, let's try to think of some things. So I right now just thought of this feeling. For example, um, I feel drained from this election as well. Like I just feel like I've been trying to reach out to some of my friends who have been on the fence. I invite them to like the event of our Voice Our Day event, and a lot of them just like don't come, or they like hold to their belief of like, oh, I'm not gonna vote. So it's kind of exhausting to trying to like tell them the importance of it and like how they could think of voting, but if they're not listening, it's kind of just, I'm drained. So I don't know, maybe I could, when I hear drained, I think of like water going down a faucet. So, or yeah, and I don't know. That's just some visuals in my head, and I don't know. I could make some art that has to do with that, maybe a video, or I could draw something, or I could maybe even make a monologue with the sound of a drain going down, or like water going down a drain in the background or something, just to have people hear it, and then like they can like visualize it as well. So that's one example of how you can really put in your emotions into your art on how you feel with the election and like creating a ballot. So anyone else have any ideas or any things they come up with from their feelings?
Khalifa, I want to address something that you were saying about your idea with maybe performing a monologue with the sound of a drain in the background. Something, if you wanted to play with that idea, or if anyone wanted to play with that idea, you could have like the energy of the monologue start from the beginning, and then as the drain progresses and as your monologue progresses, the energy just drains and you can visibly and audibly hear it. And I don't know, that's just an idea that popped into my head as you were speaking. Just like I was just visualizing a drain the whole time. Yeah, it's interesting. Something that I was thinking about for me was, and this is during a midst of several of our conversations that we've had in the past, over the past couple of weeks in preparation for this specific workshop, is like the importance of, like, I guess bringing it back to the basics, bringing it back to the beginning. And a lot of the times in our conversations, we talked about how when we were younger, we didn't really get the education that we needed to be able to feel confident in preparing for voting and feel confident when the time for voting came. So it was kind of just making me think about nursery rhymes and about like back to school. And at one point during one of our conversations, someone mentioned eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So I don't know, something, let me pull up my notebook over here. I have like some sort of idea that might be forming in regards to like the eeny, meeny, miny, mo rhyme, some sort of art in relation to it, maybe like an animation. I don't do animation, but maybe do an animation of voting and kind of the idea of how, you know, maybe you weren't as informed as you thought you were going into the ballot. And then after you're done voting, you don't feel great about it. And then after the results come out, you feel even less great about it. And then that's kind of like has this moral of the story being, you know, man, I gotta make sure every single aspect of the vote and of the ballot, I gotta make sure I really dive into every aspect before I go into the poll, whether I'm doing mail-in, in person, whatever. So I don't know, that's something that I've been playing around with in my head. I don't know. That's where I'm at.
I think that's really could go somewhere, Caitlin, and I think you could play with the idea of maybe like having the ballot and maybe every choice on the, like, Fear Factor. Do you remember the show Fear Factor, where they would have to like sit in a tank of bugs or like, I don't know, eat a cricket? Like maybe every choice that you're going through is like something negative, or maybe only one of them is positive, kind of to show, you know, when you're going in uninformed and you're just kind of making these guesses that may or may not be educated, the outcome more than likely could be negative. I think in terms of my work, I think very, very broad before I get into the specifics of what I'm going to create. So my brain right now is kind of this metaphor of like something we do a lot in my rehearsal spaces and stuff as a singer is we'll do a drop breath, which is when you exhale all your air, all of it, every single last bit of it. And the goal is that when you inhale again, now that your body is empty, your air will go into the exact places it should be going. And for me, this process right now of, you know, preparing these events, preparing and researching to vote, going out to vote, not knowing the result, in the voting booth, it's like, here I am throwing out every little bit of myself in terms of this, and in the art that I've created so far in these last 4 events, you know, my fears for the future, my connections to the past, all these like little different things. I feel like there are so many parts of myself that have now come forward and that I'm giving out, and only to hope that after all of this, I will have this sigh of relief and I will feel, you know, my body return back to where it's supposed to be. And I think that using that analogy, using that metaphor could in turn create something very beautiful. But I don't know, I also like to create a lot in sounds. I like doing soundscapes a lot, but I worry that gets a lot, I don't know, I worry it gets repetitive. But I think, I don't know, I think something with having the breath be a part of it, maybe like a heartbeat, like having this being a very like living piece and obvious connections to the human experience and what it feels like to, you know, put yourself in the line. Kind of where I'm at. I don't really have a concluding thought to what I'm saying right now. I'm just kind of like talking. I think that's all I have to say on this point. But I think that I'm definitely on a larger scale getting a lot of ideas, and now it's narrowing them down and somehow creating something out of whatever mess is in my brain right now.
I remember for the last event you were worried about, and yeah, like you just said, worried about like the soundscapes getting repetitive. But at the same time, I think there's something very, very special about the soundscapes that you create and the fact that you use actual people's voices in them. Because, well, for one thing, it connects to our voice our day because it's literally our voice. Um, and with the whole like voting process as a whole, like this is us trying to get our voices out there. And like you showing that in that kind of fashion is very, very impactful, I think.
Thanks. Yeah, Caitlin, I like what you just put in your chat, like a reverse of like kind of if I could like record a very loud exhale, flip it, and then elongate it to be the entire thing, and then there's like some sort of like chaos going on over it, and then a really long silence that almost makes it feel like it's over, and then just this very quiet, very short like inhalation. I think that could be really interesting, like a really interesting backdrop for whatever happens over it.
Yeah, I feel like
Oh,
very sorry.
okay, you go.
I feel like you could have a very heavy thing going, you know, like it could be, you know, the inhale and exhale like you're saying, and then just a lot filled in, and you can have a very interesting rise and fall to it, because obviously when we breathe there's a natural rise and fall. So if you play with that with whatever other sounds or spoken word, whatever you might incorporate, I feel like it could create something really cool.
Yeah, also when I think of like holding your breath, that's also like the anticipation we were talking about when maybe November 3rd we don't know who's going to be president, or like we're kind of have that weird span where we don't know. So like that anxiety and like anticipation of holding your breath, that could also work as well. That's a really cool idea.
Right. I could jump in with kind of the ideas that I'm thinking about looking towards. Um, so what I thought about while we were talking about the emotions part was kind of the speed of the election and the speed of the voting process and the speed of the media coverage and the headlines and all that stuff like put together. Because for me, that's kind of like what the voting process feels like. It feels like a very fast-paced like thing. Probably because I have the TV on too much lately because of all the important headlines. Should probably turn that off. But um, yeah, like just getting through all of that, as well as like bias from all the media and news that you are seeing. Is like when I was looking at the candidates' information, the only policy information I could find on one of the candidates was from their social media, and I was just like, well, that's their social media. Like they're not going to tell me anything that's like contrary or bad about them. So I'm like, what kind of good information am I getting? So just it's my art piece is probably going to be some kind of compilation. I'm trying to lean away from monologues. I'm pretty good at them usually, but I've been like spamming them for the past couple events. So I'm trying to like lean away from that. Um, Maybe some kind of visual compilation with like um, I liked what you called your piece one time, Caitlin. The one you just showed us was like multimedia, something like that. Yeah, yeah. So I like to do something like that with like online images, perhaps, that shows the kind of speed and like confusion that is this voting process.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I really like your monologues though. I don't think you can ever do too many. I've been really frustrated because I'm working on a school assignment and I'm trying to do like a lot of research behind it, but I'm getting really frustrated because a lot of the articles I'm reading, like there's no empathy there and like there's no seeing of the other side. And I feel like that could also kind of apply to like elections. So I was thinking of doing a piece where like someone, it's like a visual and there's like a person and they're like looking at something. It could be, I don't know what it's going to be yet, maybe like a lake or something. And they're like so focused on this one thing, like they're missing this huge thing happening behind them. So maybe like something in the sky, or like, I don't know exactly, but that's kind of like the vibe I want to go with. And then just like they're missing out on all this stuff because they're not connecting to like empathy or like the human experience, because they're just focused on like this one little thing, which is, you know, a metaphor for like their own experience.
Can I throw into like the mix on that, Samantha, that curiosity really, I think is an important element in what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, and just like keeping an open mind and like exploring for sure.
Yeah, because I've been thinking recently how scary curiosity can be.
Yes.
How vulnerable it can make one, especially when the tendency is to want to be partisan or be one-sided. Then the idea of curiosity really is about openness, and that is frightening. That also then it triggers courage, right, which is another element of the whole artist's elements. So it stuck in my mind, so I wanted to shout it out here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's true, like it's easy to stay in one mindset and just stick to what you know. It's a lot harder to be open and like explore other experiences and other alternatives.
Really quick, about your piece when you said people missing the bigger picture, missing the most important thing. What I thought of was this could be a visual art piece, like someone standing there looking at something and they're like examining it, and maybe they have a team of researchers like looking at it, and then like you can see like in the background or something like that, but it's like one piece of a super huge thing that's like, but it's just like one piece of it. So like maybe it's an object like that obviously has this part to it, and you obviously know that this bigger thing is missing that part, but they're focused on the part and not the whole. Or maybe it's like a mirror and they're only seeing the reflection of it, something like that.
Ooh, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds like it could be really deep. That sounds cool.
I'll work on it.
I don't know if anyone else had any other ideas or anything that came to mind, or any feelings that arose from everything.
I can share a little bit of just like what I'm thinking, which is very preliminary, but just about how I feel like, and I think other people have said things to this effect as well, but because of like the media and debates and everything that's happening, I have everyone else's voice in my head. And then, you know, I got the ballot today, and then it was like, oh, wait, this is my decision. But it feels like our votes are, you know, there's so much advertisement, political advertisement, whether it's the politicians themselves or media that's trying to get our vote. And then ultimately it's our decision and it's our choice, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it. And I feel like so much of our lives, either in school or outside of school, it's like decisions made for us, and it doesn't really prepare us for making our own decisions. And so I guess what I'm visualizing right now is just like an overlay of all the different voices I'm hearing, but also like visually all of the different articles I've read or tweets I've seen, and then getting the ballot and it's just like in front of me, and it's like, wait, this is, you know, these are the words that I'm reading, and the voice in my head is mine, and like, where does this leave me? I haven't fully conceptualized it yet, but that's just where I'm at right now.
Yeah, that kind of brings an idea of like how there's so many persuasive not propaganda, like persuasive information out there that just kind of like overtakes you, like especially like, I don't know, like big celebrities and stuff. They're like, they'll post about certain things and it'll kind of like look like they're leading you into a different way when they're saying vote, but they're kind of like weighing to a specific candidate, like they're kind of putting ideas in your head on who to vote for, when really it's like your own choice, and you should just, yeah, at the end of the day, you're writing it in, you're sending it for you or whoever else you want it for, not someone just persuading you a certain way.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think about both what you and Khalifa and you, Charlotte, are saying. It makes me think about right now, where the world is at. There's so many things that I'm seeing online, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, wherever. It's like all these people are saying, oh, if you vote for this person, you're this. If you vote for this person, you're this. If you vote for that person, you're that. And there's so many different labels and names being thrown around, and it's really scary because while I'm doing the best that I can to make really good research done so I can make the most informed and beneficial vote, I'm so scared to talk about who I'm voting for. Even if I'm super proud of who I'm going to vote for, I'm scared to talk about it because I feel like no matter who I vote for, whether I vote for the best person possible or the worst person possible, no matter who I vote for, I feel like there's going to be some sort of name I'll be called. And there's just going to be a generalization. And it's like, I think that's a really scary thing. And I feel like a lot of people can probably relate to that, especially where the election is going now. And not even just with the presidential election, but even with what we're focusing on tonight, like local election wise, there's so much going around, and there's always generalizations, and it's scary because you don't want to fall under some sort of negative stereotype because you know yourself, or at least the hope is that you know yourself, and then when there's a lot of different people saying who you are, and that's not where you know that's not the truth, it's hard. And it's hard to be public and proud and brave and sharing where you're at and where you stand because there's always going to be someone who is not a fan.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I literally wrote that down. Like that whole you're this if you vote that, you're that if you vote this. Like I wrote that exact thing down. That's exactly what I was gonna say. But then maybe in that case, Charlotte, your art could focus on some kind of examination of our community, an examination of like socially, like how we interact and like what democracy has become in a sense. Because it's not necessarily what we started off as or what we intend for it to be.
Does everyone seem content about what we talked about? Us having an artist meeting and really brainstorming about what we could be creating? Because I think we had a good conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think everybody had some really great ideas.
Can't wait to see what we all come up with. I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Yay.
So, yeah, our local election, October 25th, is our last and final event, and all ages are welcome again. So tell all your friends and family to join us for this, and remind them that their art will be a part of the election day event when we're stay the line, as well as the October event. So we hope to see a lot of artwork for that. And here is our website and an email if you have any questions, and you can reach us anytime, any day. We're available.